Something I noticed that was lacking in most chefs was a business acumen. You know, our kitchens are full of Italian chefs. Why? And they say, there's no work back home. We still see a lot of business being done at our table. We see a lot of handshaking to complete deals.
I've come to the Michelin-starred restaurant called Galvin La Chapelle in central London to meet Chris Galvin, who is chef patron of Galvin Restaurants. He set the business up with his brother Jeff in 2005. They've been acclaimed for their menus here and at the bistro next to this restaurant, as well as their luxury pub in Essex called Green Man. Chris Galvin is a hands-on chef, and I wanted to find out from him what it takes to scale a restaurant business and what lessons he's learned.
So it's a hive of activity as everyone's getting ready for another busy day at the restaurant. How did you get into this business?
It was a traditional path, really, I guess. It was cooking with my grandmother. You know, my grandmother had a huge family, so there used to be 46 cousins go around my grand's house. I used to love helping her cook for everyone. She would bake a pie for every family, so we've kept that dish on still to this day. And then I started washing up in a small bistro in Essex. Luckily, the sous chef was Anthony Worrell Thompson before he was famous, and I fell in love with it. And when I went to college, I wasn't very good at school, like a lot of chefs, but I suddenly started winning distinctions and student of the year, and so I fell in love with education and cooking.
Chris Galvin would go on to work his way up at several restaurants, including famous ones in the 80s, 90s and early 2000s, learning the trade, before he set up his own restaurant business with his brother in 2005.
I noticed, there were some incredible chefs in London at the time. The Roux brothers had come to town, Anton Mosimann, there was Marco Pierre White, and I knew it was going to be a struggle, but something I noticed that was lacking in most chefs was a business acumen. And so I worked really hard to try and understand, what made a business work, because I could see so many of these young chefs were opening restaurants but going bust very quickly. It was a bust and boom, and there was obviously something wrong there, which I didn't know at the time. But I used to ask owners, can I see the books? Can you teach me? And I was lucky. A lot of people showed me the mechanics of finance.
The Galvin brothers' first restaurant was Galvin Bistro Deluxe in London's Baker Street in 2005. That was the beginning of their empire, which has since expanded and contracted, as is normal in the restaurant business. These days, Galvin La Chapelle in Spitalfields, London, where I've come today, is their Michelin-starred showpiece restaurant.
And this isn't like a fast food restaurant where in a chain one goes wrong, you fix it. This is Michelin-star, it's got your name on it. So how do you think about quality as you try to scale?
Well, that's very interesting. I stopped at 40 years old. I did a degree in marketing, finance, HR, which fueled me. It really helped me open our first restaurant. And in most kitchens, you're training, we're a bit of a talent factory. We're bringing people through, but then you pick up the phone and call Michel Roux, I've got a great pastry chef, and this seemed madness to us to be letting these people go. And so we started to open restaurants for them. So there was always opportunities coming up. Chris, do you want to come here? Do you want to come there? So it was people first. That's our starting point. Do we have a great chef that wants to go to Edinburgh, for instance? We wouldn't have done it without the chefs that wanted to go back home. And then we based it, I had hotels, five-star hotels give you great training. So you have something called SOPs, which are like a runway to getting food from the kitchen to the table. It stands for standard operating procedures. There is one way to do it, basically. A cafe, a bistro will have 25 steps from food to table. Something like this, a Michelin-star, may well have 35, 40 steps, so a bit more complex. But they're all agreed, they're reviewed all the time. But I think any good business has to have SOPs in it. And and also at high level, it's all about consistency and quality. You've got to buy the greatest lamb, beef, fish, vegetables, and that takes a lot of time, a lot of trust with farmers, building relationships. So it's based on searching for the best of the best, and then the talent that can actually prepare and serve it.
Galvin restaurants have been going for about 20 years now, and you had 14 restaurants at your height, you've now got 3. How important is the numbers when you think about the kind of psychology of scaling?
Well, I've been cooking over 50 years, but at 20 years we've been in business. I've opened over 35 restaurants around the world. I was chef director for Sir Terence Conran. So all those sort of things helped me. I had a lot of that experience. But yeah, we grew organically, and we thought we'd be clever by having a portfolio of different restaurants. But of course that was much harder. You know, with hindsight, doing the same with a cookie cutter is much easier. So we opened cafes, we opened bistros, we opened Michelin-star restaurants, we opened in 5-star hotels, we opened brasseries. Dubai was very different to Edinburgh. We opened a beautiful small bistro in Harrods. So the first shock to the system was work culture, working with other companies, whether it's a joint venture or a management contract. It was a bit of a shock to the system. We had to learn to compromise, working with other cultures. You know, with Hilton, for example, you know, we created a Michelin-star restaurant on the top of the Park Lane Hilton, and we had to work hard with Hilton, and they are the kings of a cookie cutter around the world. Globally, you have some fabulous hotels, and you know what to expect. So trying to put that with something that was family run, bespoke, everything we do is bespoke, was hard. So it created the need for a lot of diplomacy and working out how can we do it best.
And I guess even if you get the food right, of course, you've got to think about the external factors in the economy.
Yeah, it's turbulent times, probably the most turbulent I've ever had. You know, it's the perfect storm coming out of a pandemic, trying to get on our feet, having geographic, politically the world is not in a good place. The cost of ingredients has soared. You know, I think anyone that goes shopping, Marks and Spencer's, Waitrose, you think, how on earth have I spent that? I've just bought tea and it's 29 quid. You know, it's rising so fast, I'm having trouble keeping pace with the cost of ingredients, but we can't pass that on to customers. And conversely, our guests, our customers are cash strapped. Mortgages have gone up, cost of living's gone up. I just learned a new term, job huggers, where people are holding on to jobs, they're not moving anymore. AI is just culling thousands and thousands of jobs. My next door neighbor, a young Chinese student taking a PhD, when he started in 2022, he said to me, I'm not sure what to do, Chris. We were warned there would be 25 people for every job I look at. He said, we were sat down last week and now there's 200 for every job I look at. And so I think these issues are global. I do, because I've spoken to chefs all around the world. It's not Brexit. You know, Brexit has some part to play in this, but it can't be Brexit because France is having the same problems, Spain is having the same problems, Italy. You know, our kitchens are full of Italian chefs. Why? And they say there's no work back home. Germany is encountering huge difficulties. But then when I speak to friends in Sydney in Australia, Melbourne, Argentina, Chicago, everyone is experiencing the same problem. So we have this downturn, but we have to be, agile. We've got to adapt, and we need to see this through. We need a lot of gumption to see this through. Thankfully, it's one area that, yes, AI it does touch what we're doing, but I believe that sitting at a table, sharing stories is one of the last bastions of civilization, and so we still see a lot of business being done at our table. We see a lot of handshaking to complete deals. We see suggestions. We see a lot of brainstorming at tables. So it will always be there. We just have to find a solution. which is definitely not easy right now, and we're struggling with it. You know, we're fighting to find that.
You talked a bit about the qualifications you've picked up, but does the actual discipline of being a chef on a day-to-day basis, does that affect your leadership style?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say top chefs, you know, the discipline it takes to be a top chef works well in a boardroom. You know, it's quite exacting. You know, it's every P&L. It's we quickly examine turnover, we quickly examine margins and costs, and so, you know, people often say, you know, what's the secret to a Michelin-star? And I guess what I would have learned over 50 years is consistency. Is, you know, being consistent at what you do. And there's, you know, many ways to skin a cat. And so when we come into a P&L now, you know, and I've always looked at this, whether it's running a restaurant or running business, it's a bit like Jenga, the game with the blocks. And it's saying, you know, what can we take out and it remains structurally sound? You know, how can we run our business dealing with costs, dealing with rising rates, rents, yet still deliver and still be a sense of value. So I think you've got to be very disciplined to look at your daily costs, your forecasts. That's where I do think AI will come in. You know, we in this industry, we're notably sort of dinosaurs when it comes to thinking about how we can improve business, but I think AI can help us with forecasting, and that's what we really need to look at our numbers. A bit like airlines, hotels, they can, you know, they suddenly change their rates, which we can't do in restaurants, but they will change rates depending on demand. And so I really think we need to bring AI into our business. So yeah, I think discipline. Without discipline, yeah, you couldn't run a business. Yeah, you wouldn't survive very long.